Peace. This will be part two of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration of his birthday as a national holiday. I decided to do it in a two-part series because there was a lot of things that I wanted to deal with. Now, I left off where I was beginning to examine what was it about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his movement and the personality of the individual that caused them to name him as a national hero and celebrate his birthday as a national holiday. I wanted to examine his life and the movement and his role in that movement so that it could bring a clearer picture as to why they decided to just select him as someone that they would acknowledge as a national hero in American history. Now, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. graduated from Morehouse College with a PhD in theology. Now, when you look at his history as an individual, he basically grew up in the South. His father was also a minister in the church. So Martin Luther King was someone who grew up with a church background, and he also became involved in the church. This was something that stood out with him as an individual. Pardon me, let me close this. I didn't want that sunlight to be taking up too much of this. It still appears to be coming in. Okay, I closed it off. So now, let me get back to the issue at hand. Now, I did say that Martin Luther King Jr. got a PhD, and he grew up in the South. His father was a Baptist minister, and he grew up with that background. Basically, he was a Christian. And that was something that was accepted by many white people in America, even blacks. Because let's remember, the mass majority of black people in America come from a Christian background. That is as a result of the conditions of slavery that we suffered from as a people. In slavery, they gave us the Christian religion. So Martin Luther King Jr. was no different in that regard. He had adhered to the Christian faith. So that was his appeal to white America and black America because he believed in Christianity. He was a minister in the church, just as his father was, and he held the Christian belief as something that he found to be the best way of life for him as well as for everybody else. And he was following this belief based upon what he was taught as a child, just as many of us that hold the Christian belief in our life, we was introduced to it as children. So we hold on to that because it's all we know. And that was passed from generation to generation through slavery from the slave masters. So let's call it what it really is. So Martin Luther King was attempting to use that to appeal to white America, to help in changing the conditions of blacks in America. He actually believed that whites in America really believed in the Christian religion. He was that indoctrinated with the Christian religion to the point where he believed that if he appealed to white America with the same Christian religion that they gave to him through generations of his own people, that they would respond to his appeal in a favorable way. Now, let's not be under any illusions about this. Martin Luther King actually believed in this religion. And he believed that white people believed in the religion too. If he did not believe that, then he was using it as a tool to appeal to whites. Now, I don't think that that was the case at all. Martin Luther King actually believed in that religion. I'm talking about to the utmost. There is no doubt in my mind, from the research, study, and reading that I have done, and the many different debates that I've had with many different brothers over the course of years, and the different studies that have been done, the different books that have been written about him and the time period in which he lived, the films that have been done about him, what the movement itself stands for, the nonviolent movement, all of this, you can conclude that this man actually believed in the ideology of the Christian faith. He actually believed that. There is no doubt in my mind, based upon all what I just said, that he believed that. And many black people in America today still believe in the Christian faith. They crowd these churches all across America on Sundays to worship the Christian belief. Whether they be in the South, the North, East, or West, they crowd these churches every Sunday to worship that religion. The same religion that was forced upon them by their slave master. So let's not have any illusions about what Martin Luther King actually represented. It was his belief in that religion that motivated him to do the things that he did. And it was that same belief in that religion that later on caused him to re-examine what he had committed himself to, because whites were not hearing the appeal that he was attempting to make to them based upon the religious belief that he himself was committed to. Martin Luther King attempted to appeal to the moral consciousness of whites in America. But what he later realized, I'm talking about later on in his life, basically at the end of his life, that whites did not believe in that religion as he thought that they did. It wasn't until he came to this realization that he began to speak out against a lot of the injustices and the conditions that blacks in America had suffered from. Even speaking out against the Vietnam War during that time period. Now, to take a stand like that and speak out against the Vietnam War, it was in total opposition to the American government and white people in America who supported the Vietnam War, who believed in what they was doing in Vietnam. But Martin Luther King began to put it together. He began to see the falsehood, the lies, and the deception of the American government and whites in America. That this Christian ideology and belief that he had in this religion was not the same thing that the government in America or white people in America actually accepted and believed themselves. He was so blinded by the Christian belief that it caused him to think that he could actually appeal to the moral consciousness of white America, not realizing that white America didn't have a moral consciousness. When you are struggling against people and forces that bomb your church, kill black children, sick dogs on black men and women and children, spray them with water hoses, beat them with batons, throw all kind of stuff at them. And you believe that these people have a moral consciousness? You believe that these people actually believe in a Christian religion? When he began to see those things play out time and time again, it changed the way that he viewed a lot about America and the system of government in America. That was a turning point in his own life. But it was a turning point that came far too late. Because at the time that he had came to this realization, his time was up. But he didn't realize that. So when he started now beginning to see the real situation of what was happening in America, and he began to see the government for what it really was, and whites in America for who they really were, he was at the end of his life. And it was too late. This was something that he himself did not realize. That he had wasted all of his time, effort, and energy in attempting to appeal to white America. Yeah, they passed the Civil Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Bill, yeah, all of that. But what does that really mean? And what did it mean then? That Lyndon B. Johnson signed those bills into law. What did it really mean? And what would be the long-term effect of that for years to come, for generations to come? I think those things are things that we need to look at, because in understanding why they would make Martin Luther King birthday a national holiday, we need to look at this. Look at his history. Look at the man and what he stood for. Because they chose him out of all those movements and people to make his birthday a national holiday. So what was it about him that appealed to white America where they would make his birthday a national holiday? Years later, after they had already assassinated him, why would they select him out of all those people and movements to make his birthday a national holiday? These are things that I think we need to look at in understanding Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the celebration of his birthday as a national holiday. Because in all my research, study, and reading about this, I have came to the conclusion that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was no different than many black people today who believe in the American dream. Because Martin Luther King had a speech called the American Dream. And this was the speech that he gave on the March of Washington that happened August 28th, 1963. That was the March on Washington, where they say about 250,000 people marched to Washington, where he gave this now became a classic speech, the I Have a Dream speech. Now, 5 years later, after that speech, because that speech happened in 1963, he would be assassinated. Now, when he gave that speech, the year of my birth, 1963, I was 6 months old as a baby when he gave that speech. But before his assassination, he would begin to see a lot of things and begin to now start to realize a lot of things for himself. And this is what caused him to say that his American dream had become an American nightmare. With all of the things that had happened in the movement and the time period in which he was out there fighting for what he considered the rights of blacks in America. They made him now a national hero. Now, it doesn't take a lot to really read, research, and study this history to learn about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to understand what happened with him and the movement in which he was the leader of the nonviolent movement, which is a concept. It is an ideology that he adopted from the Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi, who had led his people in India to independence from the British government, because the British controlled India during that time period. They used the same kind of philosophy, nonviolent. And Martin Luther King had studied Mahatma Gandhi. He even visited India, him and his wife, because he was so impressed with that philosophy, that ideology, that he adopted it and attempted to use it as a model for the struggle of blacks in America. But let's remember that there was a lot of black people in America that didn't follow that philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So let's not be under the myth that the mass majority of black people followed that philosophy. In part one, I spoke of the many different movements that was out there at that time period. I spoke of the Black Panther movement, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Movement, the NAACP, the National Urban League, the Nation of Islam, us, United Slaves. All of these different movements was out there. Even the 5% Nation that was started by Allah. Because the 5% Nation that was started by Allah was started in 1964. So when Martin Luther King was assassinated, the nation was already 4 years old, because he was assassinated in 1968. The nation was started in 1964. So it was already 4 years old when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And this was something that I think when we look at history, we see all these different movements, and we see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with this philosophy of nonviolence. The mass majority of black people in America did not support that kind of philosophy, because they were looking at their own conditions and they knew that, no, that was not the answer to changing their own conditions as a people. So they didn't agree with Martin Luther King philosophy about nonviolence. They didn't agree with that. But he did have a percentage of people, I'm talking about black people, as well as whites, because he did have a percentage of whites that actually supported and believed in the nonviolent philosophy that he was preaching. Yeah, you had a percentage of whites that believed in that. And I think this is really the appeal that his movement was able to have over the course of years after he was already assassinated and gone, that made him a national hero and made his birthday a national holiday. Because he appealed to a certain segment of whites in America. And in appealing to a certain segment of whites in America, this changed how he would be seen in the later years after he was already dead and gone. Now, how they would view him as someone in history. Well, we know how they reviewed him now because they made his birthday a national holiday. And today, Monday, January 15th, 2018, they're acknowledging him as a national hero. Now, I don't know if that's something that the mass majority of black people in America view him as. I doubt that seriously. But, of course, you have those blacks that would look at him as that and would celebrate him as that today. But then you have a lot of black people that would not even acknowledge him at all. And they may know about him. They may have read some history about him, did some research, know certain things about him. But they may not hold him in such high regard as white America has made him out to be. Because that's who made him out to be, this national hero with the nonviolent movement. I doubt very seriously that the mass majority of blacks hold him in that regard. And many of them don't even know the history. But they know something about him. And more, the myths about him is becoming what the mass majority of blacks learn about him. The myths, not the actual truth of what he did and what he stood for, but the myths that have been created about him that surrounds his life. This is what a lot of people know of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But now I want to leave that area and deal with something else. Because I just wanted to open up and complete that about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the celebration of his birthday as a national holiday. But today, I wanted to really focus on our development as a people. I wanted to deal with how we, as individuals and as a people, still have not fully dealt with our issues and our conditions, we have still allowed others to dictate to us as to what we should or should not be fighting for, struggling for. We've allowed others to dictate to us as to what we should do. And I think that is something where we have to seriously look at and change as a people. Because we have far too many of us that go on every day as if everything is okay. We are not struggling or fighting for better conditions or change in our conditions. We've just accepted it as, that's just what it is. We continue to go on as if this is just what it is. We are not fighting against it or struggling against it. We think that everything is okay. We live our life day by day as if everything is okay. We don't really see the need to become an instrument of change in our own conditions. We think that the struggles of the 1960s and all of that has made it possible now for us to live the way that we live, and it's okay. We think that that is the case today. No, it's not. We still live in poverty as a people. We still are struggling as a people. We live in the most undeveloped areas in America, in the poorest areas in America. We still have the poorest health. We still suffer from crime, drugs, violence, and all kinds of sickness and ailments in the areas and locations that we live in America. Many of us are still struggling from day to day to try to make ends meet. Children are still being born in poverty. The mothers and fathers still struggle every day to make ends meet. So we still are suffering as a people. Yeah, there's some blacks that have made it what they call successful in America. You know, often when you hear about that, you think of all of these different individuals that they have in the media, that they in Hollywood, they doing all kinds of things to make, money. They are successful. They live in the best houses, the best neighborhoods. They have the best cars, and they got all kinds of luxuries. But that doesn't speak for the mass majority of blacks that live in America. That's a very small percentage of blacks that live in America. The mass majority of blacks, when you go to these neighborhoods in the inner cities, and I'm talking about in the inner cities all throughout America, not just in New York City. Because New York City is not where the majority of blacks live. Yeah, you have a large percentage of blacks that live in New York City, but you also have other cities throughout America that blacks populate and live. And it's large percentages of blacks. I'm talking about in Chicago, LA, I'm talking about in Detroit, in Atlanta. I mean, I don't need to go through naming all the different areas that a large percentage of blacks live. But the reality is that wherever we at, in whatever city it is, whatever state it is, we still suffer from the same conditions. And it's not going to take a government that's going to change that. Because if you still waiting for that to happen, then you're going to die waiting for that to happen. Because that's never going to happen. If it hasn't happened in all these years, it's not going to happen. You need to become a part of that process of change. Because if you're sitting around waiting for these people to change it, then there's something seriously wrong with you. Because that's not going to happen. If you don't be a part of the process of change, starting with yourself, it's not going to happen. We must be the instrument of change in our own lives and affect the lives of others, of our own people. If we don't do that, it's not going to happen. So don't wait around for someone to change your condition. You have to start the process of change. Even with your own family members. Don't wait for them either. Because I know a lot of us come from backgrounds of families where a lot of them are not doing anything but the same thing that they've been doing, which is nothing. Many of them are still victims of the crime, the drugs, the violence, the gangs. They are still victims of that. So they're not changing their own conditions. So don't wait around for that to happen, even in your own family. If you don't cause it to happen, if you don't start the process of change, it's not going to happen. I know that from personal experience. If I didn't start the process of change with myself, it wasn't going to happen. Nobody else is going to do this. Nobody else was going to do it. I had to start that process. And the same thing applies to you. So don't allow anybody to have you under illusions that things is going to get better without you being a part of the process of that happening. Don't allow anybody to have you under those illusions, because that's where you'll stay. If you don't become a part of the process of change, it's not going to happen. If I didn't decide that it was time for me to change, to clean myself up, to get out of the life that I was living, it wouldn't have happened. Not my family, not anybody else could have caused that to happen. I had to cause it to happen. So it starts with self. In every one of my videos, I deal with the process of change starts with self. That you can't look outside of yourself, you have to look within yourself. And you have to begin to research, study, and read. Because many of us don't even research, study, or read anything. We just accept everything, but we don't read anything. And that's one of the problems that I see with many of us as a people. We fail to understand the importance of researching, studying, and reading, how that can impact and shape how we think and act as individuals. We don't see that. If you look at many of the people in history that you have read about, researched, or studied, or you need to read about, research, or study, they had to go through a process of change within themselves before they begin to even talk about bringing about a change with their own people. Every last one of them. There is not anybody that you will be able to research, study, and read about that have not challenged themselves to go through that process before they start dealing with other things in relationship to their own people. I'm talking about changing your values, your morals, your principles, changing the mindset that you're under, changing how you think and how you act, your actions and your behavior. All of those things is not going to just happen. You have to cause it to happen. There is just too much work that has to be done. I'm talking about with self-development before you can begin to start talking about bringing about a change in the conditions that we are confronted with as a people. There's just too much that has to be done. So I would say to you today that we must take a serious approach to challenging ourselves to be better than what we are as individuals. I'm talking about as a man and a woman, as a person, and as a human being. We have to challenge ourselves to do better and be better. We can do that. But we can't do it if we just sitting by and doing nothing, hoping that it's going to happen, waiting for someone to make it happen, because that will never be. We have to start that process of change. And it starts with self. Now, before I close, I want to say this, that I want to thank all those that have supported babybeautiful.co, our online baby store. And I want to ask all of those who have not supported it to continue. I want you, with the ones that have already supported it, continue. But those who have not supported it, who have not seen the need to become a part of what we are doing so that we can begin to build economically and independent and start building businesses and communities where our children will grow up in positive, healthy environments. I'm not talking about the kind of environments that we grew up in, because those are not positive, healthy environments. Look at how a lot of us turned out. Well, many of us are not here anymore. Not from the generation that I come from and the people that I grew up with. Many of them are gone. I'm just one of the fortunate ones that's still around. I'm saying if we're going to build positive and healthy environments for future generations, I'm talking about the babies that are here today and the ones that are being born today. If we're going to build healthy, positive environments for them to grow up in, communities, then we have to start building economically. We have to start supporting each other and one another. And I've established the online baby store as a part of that process. You're going to buy items anyway for your babies. Why not do it with your own people? You give money to all these different people. Why not do it with your own people? Look at our communities. Well, if you want to call it that, but I often say that I don't call them communities because we don't control anything. In order for it to be our communities, we have to control economically, politically, culturally, socially, and educationally. Well, we don't control none of that. We populate areas and live in locations, but we don't have communities because we don't control every aspect of the areas or the locations in which we live in. So if we're going to start doing that, then we have to start thinking in terms of ownership, independence, building for self, and doing for self. That's the only way that we're going to change that. But we first have to start with self. In changing our values, our morals, our principles, our behavior, and our actions and becoming educated about ourselves and our history. We have to research, study, and read. If we don't do these things, then we won't have a chance in changing our own conditions. It starts with self. How we interact with each other, how we look at each other, how we deal with one another. If we don't change that kind of behavior, then we don't have a chance in changing our own conditions. We have to deal with each other. But before we deal with each other, we have to deal with our own individual self. You can't begin to deal with other people, or your own people for that matter, before you first deal with yourself. It starts with self. And I know we have a lot of issues within ourselves that we have to deal with before we begin to tackle a lot of the conditions that we suffer from as a people. So let's focus on that. And with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings until the next video.